Hi everyone, welcome back again, and in this video we are going to check loops in Java. Looping is a feature that facilitates the execution of a set of instructions repeatedly while some condition evaluates to true. Java provides three ways of executing the loops, which perform similar functionalities but differ in syntax and condition checking time. In this video, we'll take a look at all three ways of executing loops in Java. And to get started, we'll start with the for loop. And for the for loop, they provide a concise way of writing the loop structure, and it consumes the initialization, condition checking, and increment or decrement in the same line, thus giving us an easy to debug structure. And the structure or the syntax of these for loops looks like this. Start with the for keyword, then the initialization condition, and here we initialize the loop variable in use. Here, this marks the start of a for loop. You can use an already declared variable here, where you will just initialize it, or you can declare that variable and initialize it here. And when you do that, it will only be local to this for loop only. And this testing condition is used for testing the exit condition of this loop. It must return a Boolean value, and it is also an entry control loop. What do I mean when I say an entry control loop? What I mean is that before iterating even once, first have to check the condition. If this condition returns false, this statement will not be executed. That is what I mean by entry control loop. Then after that, this statement or block of code will be executed if this testing condition returns true. Then here in the increment decrement section is where we update this variable we initialized here. So let's see a for loop in real program. Create a file, call it loops.java, and then after that add a class and a main method, and inside here this is where we put our for loop. And as you've seen, we start with the for keyword there, then we can declare and initialize a variable here like that, or you can declare a variable out here like that, then you can initialize it here. Then for the testing condition, this is where you put your condition. Here we'll be checking if I is less than 5, and then you put your increment or decrement because we want this condition to be false after some iteration. Here we will use increment like that. Then we add the body of this for loop. We can print something out, and what will happen is that we first check the condition, and this is the initialization or the start of this for loop. And because I is 0 here, this condition is true, and because this condition is true, this statement will be executed. But if this condition was false, maybe you put something like greater than here. Now, because this condition is false, this statement will not be executed. That means that the life cycle of this for loop will be terminated there. No any statement will be executed. But because we want this statement to be executed, we put less than here to make this testing condition true. Now let's run this code. To run this code, you can do that, and what it will do is that it will print this statement 5 times. You can do that. You see, this is what I mean. Also, you can debug it if you want to see step by step of how these variables are being updated. So to debug it, place here to add a breakpoint where the for loop is starting, and then come here to the debug Java and click that button and wait for it. Then after that, you can watch the variables here as they change. Okay, so use this step over button here. So you click it, you can see I is 0. Then for the first iteration, we increment I to 1 like that until I is 4. Then after we increment it to 5, when I is 5, this loop will end because this condition will return false. And when this condition returns false, it marks the end of this for loop. So that is how you use for loop in Java. And something else to note is that, let me end this, you can also nest loops the same way we were nesting if statement. So here you can add another for loop. You can say maybe like int j, give it a value, then add a condition here, then the increment or decrement there. Then you can do something here. And remember, when you do this one has a time complexity of big O of n, and this one has a time complexity too of big O of, and because this will run every time we update our I here, the total time complexity of this nested loop will be big O of n squared. Okay, so that was for loop. Next, we'll move on to while loop. And for the while loop, it allows code to be executed repeatedly based on a given Boolean condition. It is like a repeating if statement. And like a for loop, it is also an entry control loop. That means that we first check the condition before executing any of the statement here. So this is the syntax of the while loop. We start with the while keyword. Then this is where we put our condition, and inside our loop statement we can update our variable here, or the condition variable inside here. So let's see while statement inside the code. To use our while loop, let's initialize I to 0, then use a while keyword like that and put our condition here. You can say I is less than 5 like that. Then this is where you put the statements that you want to execute like that. And something that you're not supposed to forget, this is very important, is the update of this variable here, because if you don't update it, this will always return true. And because this one will always return true, this loop will run forever, getting you stuck in something called an infinite loop, which will run until your computer runs out of memory. To prevent that, make sure you update that variable there like that. When you do that, you can debug it by adding a breakpoint. Then after adding a breakpoint, you can now watch as this variable changes. So here you can see we start with I as 0, then you can step into it, print the first statement, then increment I to 1, check the condition again, execute the statement, update it until you reach I is 4. And I is 4, that means this is the last iteration, because the moment you update I to 5, this variable or this condition returns false. And when this condition returns false, that marks the end of our while loop here. So when you do that, you can see our while loop terminates there. And just like for loop, you can also nest other while loop in here and give it other conditions. Okay, if you want to do I is 10, and just the same as for loop, when you nest something like this, the big O will be of n squared like that. If you nest another while loop inside this while loop like that, then the time complexity here will be big O of n cubed. So that was while loop. Finally, we will take a look at do while loop, which is similar to a while loop, but it checks for condition after executing the statements, and therefore it is an example of an exit control loop. Unlike for loop and while loop, which were entry control loop, this one is an exit control loop because it first execute the statement before checking the condition. This is the syntax of a do while loop. We start with the do keyword, then we put our statement here, and then the while condition here. So let's see it in action. To use a do while loop like that, use the do keyword, then inside these curly braces, this is where we put our statement. So here I can say this will execute once. I want to show you what it means when we say it is an exit control loop. Then here we put our while condition, and for our while condition, let's initialize a variable I, give it value 0. Then here you can say, well, I is greater than 5, and even though this is false, this statement will be executed. When you run this code, let me remove this break statement there, then run this code like this, you can see our statement was executed even though this condition is false. That is what the exit control loop means. Then we can do the same as we were doing with the other loops. Yeah, we can put less than 5 like that. Then we can run our code. When you do that, you can see we are in an infinite loop. So this one will continue running over and over like that without stopping because we did not update our variable here. So make sure you cancel it like that, because if you have a big RAM, this will run for a while. So to prevent that, make sure you add or update the variable here like that. And when you do that, then run do while loop again. You see, it works very fine. So that was do while loop. Something else I wanted to show you is the break and continue statement. And for the break statement, it is a control statement that is used to terminate the loop. As soon as the break statement is encountered from within a loop, the loop iteration stops there and the control returns from the loop immediately to the first statement after the loop. So let's see how break statement is used to terminate the loop. And to do that, we will use while loop because it has at least a simpler syntax. So here you can say I is less than 5. Then we can put an if condition here. Then what we'll do is if I is equal to 2, then break like that. Okay, then we can print something out. So here we can say this is iteration, and here you can concatenate I there. So the moment I is 2, this will break. And when we run this code, let me clear the screen like that. Okay, we did not update our variable here, so we are stuck in an infinite loop. And as I said earlier, make sure you update our variable. So here you can say I++. Let's run this code again. And when you do that, you can see we executed this code, and when I became 2, this break statement terminated our while loop here. And something else to note is that if you have another while loop here or another loop inside here, and we have a break statement inside it like that, this break statement here will only affect this inner while loop, not the outer while loop. Okay, if you want to terminate the outer while loop using a break statement, you must add that break statement inside its body, not inside another while loop. That was break statement. Something else I wanted you to know is the continue statement, and continue statement is used to skip the current iteration of a loop and can be used on any type of loop such as for, while, and do while loop. So let's see how continue statement is used. Again, we'll use this while loop. Here we can do something like print I, check if, can use if condition here. If I is 2, then make sure you increment it like that and then continue. Then here, let's take this code here. Let's put it there. Then increment I there. So what will happen here is that when I becomes 2, we will increment it here to make sure you are not stuck in an infinite loop. This continue keyword will be encountered, and the moment this continue keyword is encountered, instead of this statement here, instead of this following statement here to be executed, it will continue to the next iteration, which will be I is 3, and then it will move on like that. So when we print this out, we will not print 2 because that iteration was skipped. When you do that, you can see we did not print 2 here because we encountered a continue statement. That is how you use continue statement. And in real applications, you can use this continue statement to skip some lines of code or some block of code prior to some condition. In the next few videos, we will work on loops questions, which will help you understand for loops, do while loop, and while loops in deep. See you there.